Morning, everyone. If we can make our way to our seats, we'll get started.
So we do open this up as a corporate services meeting? Yeah.
Okay, we will call the corporate services meeting to order. Looking for a motion this morning to approve the agenda. Thank you. Seconded. All those in favor? Great, thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. It's just budget on the agenda this morning. I will put out a little request with the mics. Danny tells me don't worry about waiting for him to turn your mic on. He'll catch you as fast as he can, so you might only miss a word or two. So that'll maybe just speed things up a little bit, is the point. So I will go straight to Jim, way down in the far end. Go ahead, please, Mr. Zaffino.
Thank you. Am I on? Okay, thank you. So, thank you. Welcome to draft 2 of the Regional District 2022-2026 budget. There's just a few things that I want to talk about before I start the presentation. One of the things that I just recently received from the British Columbia Assessment Authority is a preview non-market value numbers. And they are preview. They will change by the middle of December. I'm finding that for some reason, a lot of electoral areas and municipalities have a decrease in non-market value businesses. And I plan to challenge it. I can challenge it for the regional districts. As far as the municipalities go, the best I can do is forward the information of what I'm doing to your CFOs, and then it's up to them to challenge it on their behalf. Because as far as non-market growth goes, it's your wiggle room, and with that money, you can increase the services, increase reserves, or reduce taxes. And it's your option right now, but with the reduction in businesses, it puts you at a disadvantage. So with that, I just want to start off with the first part of the slide, and essentially it's the agenda review. And one of the things that you're going to be looking at is re-looking at some of the grant submissions, the extra requests that you received that are in the budget. And also, we're going to talk about the capital projects and the changes that were made between November 5th and now. I've had meetings with the majority of the electoral area directors that wanted meetings, and I've encouraged the municipalities directors, if they wanted to talk to me about the budget, that's also something that I'll always encourage, so that you know more than just seeing the 500 plus pages. There's a lot to it. There are some consolidations on there, but there's also a lot of background information that I along with the managers, can help. One thing that I did do this year is, with the budget changes, it wasn't just the manager and the director, it was all three of us. So all managers that affected your budgets were invited. If they couldn't come, we posed a question and they would be getting back to you. And I know there's a few outstanding questions that the managers weren't able to get to you, mostly because of the floods, but they will get to you. And if there's something that you're passionate about that you want to wait, all you need to do is defer it. This is draft 2. You can change the budget right up to and adoption. So there's a lot of wiggle room with that. So what I've just stated earlier is you'll be looking at reconsidering the program change requests, reconsidering the supplemental FTEs, lunch approval for request amendments. So that is the changes that the managers, yourself, and myself had requested the changes. I've itemized every single change, and I believe there's 36 of them. At one point, hopefully we can reach the capital requests. It should be a lot easier than previous years. There's 44 different services that have capital requests, and as stated earlier, currently none of them are funded from taxes. At one point they were, because they would have been transferred to reserves, and the reserves are funding the majority of the projects. However, they're also funded from grants and any donations, etc. So planning to wrap up somewhere between 250 and 3 through the chair. I encourage to ask questions, so that if there's something that you're concerned about or need more information, please ask through the chair. And with that, if we don't finish this time, I've got December 3rd and 10th, but that's flexible and that can be changed to meet the needs of the board. So one of the things that we will be talking about, and not at this meeting because there may be some changes, more than likely there will be, that will affect the user fees. So I'd like to have it through staff, bring back some consequences for user fees. So you've got 3 different tax requisitions in the budget. One of them, as the one that you're seeing here, is as presented to you November 5th. So that has the tax requisitions. It has what the non-market growth was at the time that I estimated, and I could only estimate at that time for the electoral areas because I didn't have the building permits for the municipalities. Though, as I stated earlier, the non-market growth is out at a preliminary level. It will change. However, some of them are, in one case, it's actually astoundingly high. It's just incredibly, it's like a Kelowna increase where the increases in non-market growth is unbelievable, and I'm really happy with it. This one here is the requests that were made with the changes that you've authorized on November 5th, and including, and it's not official until you as a board approve the changes that the directors have requested in your own areas, but it does have the tax impact for all of the FTEs that you requested, the grant in aids, the supplemental requests and services. So I thought it would be important to show you what consequences of the approvals for those changes are. But I need to stress that it does include the changes in your requests. And just so that the board as a whole knows, those changes did not affect any of the service levels on the operational side. A lot of them were how to treat the surplus. So right now, as stated last year, your surpluses funnel through operational reserves, and then from operational reserves, you as the directors determine how much of those reserves do you want to use. And in some cases, a lot of those surpluses don't really need to go into reserves because the service is something that is self-sustaining, and if you can use it to reduce the reserves, the tax requisition, I would never recommend 100% because then you've artificially reduced it, but I think you guys as a group did a great job in how much of it is being transferred. This is the 3rd tax requisition, and it is, I thought, and this is important, it excludes all of your approvals that you've done on November the 5th, but includes the changes made in your requests to adjust the budget accordingly in each area. And in a few cases, just so the board as a whole knows, it actually, some requests are going up just because the director thought they would need more money in one area than what was originally projected. So regional grant and aid, the reason I just thought I'd bring this up again because that's one of the first things that we're going to be asking you to look at is, so grant and aids will not be provided to subsidize activities that are reasonable at a service level. Preference will be given to those events or initiatives that have not received assistance. No organization will receive more than 2 regional grants. And there is one that already has received 2, but we thought that the staff thought that you as a board should be re-looking at it. You can change your own policy. It was a very small amount 2 years ago. And again, the maximum amount that you can give in a grant and aid is $50,000. So to be considered for a grant under this policy, it won't be the word for word, but organization is locally based, benefits more than at least 3 electoral areas, support from sources other than local government, alignment with at least 1 regional district strategic goal. So grant funding is not permitted to be used, and it's stated as remuneration for wages, capital improvements, operation, and tax payments. So I did send copies for, and I hope that you have it in front of you because it is small up there, but I've got a listing of the grants that were requested, and what the board approved. And this is the opportunity for you to look at it and reconsider. So I've got the first one is Alley Cat Society, and the board did not approve the $5,000 request. The reason for this request is to help fund veterinary costs.
Jim, can we just roll around to where they get to talk?
Yeah, this is it.
If somebody wants to change one of the grants and needs, then you have to bring it forward as a resolution. And then the chair will ask the questions, and then we can get into the justification.
So these are the first five. I'll leave it up to the chair.
Okay. So unless somebody wants to make a motion to change any of these, this is your opportunity to do that.
Okay, don't leave them too long.
Seeing no hands, Director Bauer.
Yeah, thank you. So we have $50,000 for the food hub district Summerland.
We're not quite there yet.
Am I talking to that? Yeah?
It's on the next five.
Oh, it's okay. I'll wait
So
for
it's
the
just the
next-
first
I'll
five
wait-
that we've got up here.
I'll wait for the next five then.
Okay. Seeing no hands for these first five, we'll go on to the next five if you would, please, Jim. And then I'll go to Director Bauer.
Okay, so we have an economic development account that was approved a few years ago that we're kind of using to allocate money towards the Film Commission, but it doesn't have to be the Film Commission. It is an open economic development account. Now, this food hub is a truly regional within the RDOS project. It supports all regional areas of agriculture and all our farmers, as we know, through a multitude of internal and external components are in dire straits. So I would like to suggest that we take the money that we usually give to the Film Commission and take the grant in aids out of this and use the money that's in the economic development to put towards the food hub. So I'm happy to hear the conversation on that.
Okay. Interesting thought. I'll go to Director Kazakovich. Just talk and he'll catch you.
Okay, I'm just wondering with that account, could we get clarification of how much tax requisition? I think we have more in that account than what we've been putting out for the Film Commission. Is that correct?
We issue $35,000 each year, and the tax requisition is the $35,000 plus the administrative overhead. So
Go ahead.
So there's not anything extra right now that we have?
no.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Director Holmes.
But following up on that, I think there's a limit of how much we can requisition. And I'm just wondering, what is that limit in that fund?
Go ahead.
That's the limit? We can't requisition more? Okay.
Director Gettens.
So I think that, I hear what you're saying, Director Bauer, on that idea. I would suggest, however, with the Ontario Film Commission, I think it's also bringing value, and it's a regional program that spans beyond our region as well. It's East Kootenays, all the way from North Okanagan, Central Okanagan. So I wouldn't want to see us not support the Okanagan Film Commission. I think we've all seen a benefit. We've all seen them in every single one of our regions. So I don't think there's one that has more value than the other. I think they're two very different things, and I don't think we have to do one less just to do something good. I think we should be a leader, absolutely, in the food hub, but I certainly don't think we should cut the nose off of the Okanagan Film.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the CAO first and then Director Roberts.
So those are two different services. So we have grant and aid comes out of general government. We have the economic development fund that's a service by itself. So what I'd prefer is if you just deal with the grants and aid first. If you don't want to fund the Summerland project, then let's turn that down. Or if you want to reduce it, you can move an amendment And then when we get into the operating budget, because Film Commission's a line account, then we can decide if you don't want to budget anything for that this year, that's fine as well, but that would be a separate discussion in my mind.
Okay, Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair. Now that means what I was going to say is postponed until later.
Okay,
So-
so no, Director Gattens, go ahead.
So I wanted to just say that I support keeping the hub in a grant and aid, especially since we've got it dependent on the other government grants. So I don't want to see this one removed.
Okay. Director Bauer?
Yeah, the issue I have is it's not just that you make it dependent on. We have that in the budget, so we're going to ask the taxpayer to give us the money regardless whether we're going to use it or not. So it's in the budget. So I'm just, I'm hesitant to take that off, and I get the difference between the one line item being the line item and this being the grant in aid. I'm just sort of trying to, we can't have, I think, when we get to the Film Commission later on, that conversation will be a different one, but I'm just trying to be a little bit, proactive here. I don't want to make the motion to take it off because I see the sort of importance of that regional program, as I mentioned, but on the other hand, maybe I should do it now so we can talk about it with a greater urgency later, It's one of those.
Okay. Director Johansson?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on process. I do kind of struggle with that we are going to, as Director Bauer mentioned, going to tax for it, and then if we don't use it, we're going to stick it into a surplus reserve, I'm guessing, at some point. I'm just wondering, as far as grant and aid, do they all have to be funded out of taxation? This is kind of a unique one. Is it possible to fund this out of a reserve in anticipation that, it may be unlikely that we get the government funding that's needed to make sure that we make this expenditure? So we are taxing for something that's kind of, who knows whether we're going to get that government funding. It may be more prudent if it's possible to fund this out of a reserve, typical to some things that we do fund that way, where, we fund a certain amount out of a reserve, maybe more than we need, knowing that it will only expend what we need. So I guess that's my question on process. If we could fund this out of a reserve as opposed to taxing for something we may not use, then it might be more, there might be more of an appetite to keep it in.
Can you answer that, Jim?
If this does go through, it would be taxed against the general government. So the reserve, if it's funded from the reserve, it would be coming out of the general government reserve. So that's $50,000 that you would have less to spend on other issues.
What is the reserve at the moment in general government?
I will look it up.
Yeah, no, exactly. Don't have taxation if we have the money.
So there's two reserves. There's one called General Government Feasibility Fund, which I wouldn't recommend. The other one is General Government Capital. So that would restrict you from spending any of the funds because it would be a bylaw that's for a capital project. I don't see any operational general government reserve. On the capital side, it is 260,000. 260,000.
And the other one was?
The other one was a General Government Feasibility Fund, and that's $157,500.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Director Holmes.
Yeah, so last year, I remember when we were doing grant and aids, there was, there was money that wasn't spent from the previous year because of COVID. So that those grant and aids were, were taxed for, but then the recipients didn't collect them. And I remember asking it last year, why can't we use some of that money for, well, this year's grant and aids? And I was told then, well, no, because it's gone into reserves, and so we still have to tax for the grant and aids from this year. So here we are. So where are those grant and aids that we never paid out in previous years? We can't access them for grant and aids now? They must be somewhere where we can use that money for this.
Go ahead.
So that would be 2021, and the numbers I gave you were the audited statements as of December 31st, 2020. Once the year ends over, any surpluses in 2021 based on the board's policy, the new policy, would go into operating, and that would be transferred over and could be used. However, the surpluses aren't finalized yet, so it's not official until they are.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair. Could we make a motion? Is it possible that we would put this if we have the covering from last year's or this year, 2021's reserve? Since we know it intuitively, but we don't have it in black and white yet.
Yeah, we're just not sure of the exact amount yet that's going to be left over, but. Can always make a motion. Go ahead, Director Holmes.
Further, like
Did we all just get kicked out? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Hopefully they'll bring us back.
I think I'll go for another coffee.
I don't think they even miss us, Bob.
Maybe they don't know we're gone yet, Rick.
Probably. Hey, Bob, I was going to ask you about mosquito control. And I guess I should phone George about this because he's 3 times higher than I am. But you're quite a bit higher too, if I remember right. So I'm just kind of curious why it got turned away. Like, I understand the areas that pay nothing. Nobody wants to take on taxation, but I was kind of surprised by George and Tim, and I haven't had a chance to talk to them, but I know you turned against it too. It's just a question in my mind that, you know, how this works for those of us that are paying quite a bit more than our neighbors, so to speak.
I don't know, Rick. Without it, the areas over here that get it, people wouldn't be able to live there.
Well, and I'm not arguing that, but the town of Oliver pays $6,000. I pay 46 grand. Jeremias pays nothing. That 46 grand for me works out to $25 a household. Jeremias pays nothing, but George pays 103 per household. So, you know, I'm just kind of, I mean, Jeremias would be a mess if George wasn't dealing with it, in my opinion. So just curious.
Yeah.
Just waiting for the slides to come back.
All right.
We're back.
Okay.
We'll talk to you.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, Katie's had some facial reconstruction.
Are we still on the?
No, we've moved off of that. Director Monteith, you have a question?
Just a question about point of order. I don't know if they were included in the vote.
I can see them on my screen. Now, whether they could hear me or not, that might be a question.
No, we totally missed it. You guys punted us.
Yeah, Danny lost the meeting for a bit, probably during the vote, so you may want to do that again.
So we'll re-vote on that.
Only 2 again.
Good catch. Well, there's actually 5 of them up there, if everybody shows, but, okay, so we'll recall that question due to a technical glitch. Those in favor of the motion, which is to remove the food hub, the 50,000. Those in favor of removal? Okay, thank you. Those opposed? Okay, motion is defeated. Okay, I think that finishes with those next 5.
Sure.
And we're on to whatever.
Sure.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Director Johansson.
Just one follow-up on that vote, just what the CAO said, that we would look to fund that from reserves or we would find the funding for it. Just how do we make sure, do we just have to make sure that we bring it up at the first reading to say, okay, this one is going to show as taxation right now, but we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to have a discussion made last year or in 2021 and what we could use of that to fund this? Just wondering on the process to make sure we don't sort of.
Yeah, I
slip
don't
it
believe
through.
we have a grant reserve, but Jim will look for that and we can advise you at the next meeting. Then you can, like you were saying, you want to vote again?
Well, I'm just wondering how we make sure that we don't just let this go through now in taxation when we had a discussion that, and that you had mentioned, CAO, that we would find a way to fund it, and whether it's reserves or anything else. So just looking at a way to reduce taxation down the road, if there is grant and aid funding that didn't get used, that we would be able to redirect that money to this grant and aid request.
Yeah, if it's not reserve, it'll be a tax requisition. That's why it's important that you vote whether you want to support the project or not.
I think, like for myself, and just maybe not understanding, I do want to support the process, but I think there's a way to support the process and not have it funded totally from taxation.
Yeah.
And how do
We'll
we
flag
make
it.
sure that that is, I think there's some appetite around the table, and to look at that and just wondering, do we need another motion or how do we make sure
Well,
that that
no,
happens with
Jim
this
is going to look,
particular?
he's got that. He's going to look to see if there's a reserve.
Okay,
Jim will flag
Yeah,
it
so
and
we'll,
when we
and
know
you'll have
the
another
reserve.
shot at this.
thank you, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Savino.
Just to assure you, I did flag it and that it will come back to the board for final approval.
Thank
So,
you.
Go ahead.
so just a little bit of history that you have seen before. We do have 156 services this year, up one because we now have the Apex Fire Department. Again, just to make sure everyone also knows, only those that participate in the services do pay. The tax requisitions and the budget, as you see, will change. The actual 2022 assessment isn't out yet. Usually it's out first, second week of January. Prior year surpluses will be adjusted. I was very conservative in looking at the surpluses. And in some cases, when I did have the meetings with electoral directors, they were adjusted slightly. Not all budgets are in. The SIR, OBWB still have to come in to me, and the library one has come in. That was one of the first ones that was outside that I was able to update, so that will not change. 22 capital summary, you've seen there's a whole new section on your budget, approximately 120 pages. It has 44 services that are requesting capital budgets. None of them are funded directly through taxes. There are a number of projects that are identified uniquely. It no longer shows one number with one amount. It shows the different projects specifically and how they are to be funded. The capital project request, so the capital lists projects individually and include the funding as I stated. It also lists the detail. By that I mean managers now fill out more specific information on the 2022 capital requests, just so that you have an understanding of why, and also includes the extra costs that project may be incurred in the future years, because there's a consequence in some cases, in other cases, no. So the next section on here is the program change requests. I do have them separated, so this is as you requested. It shows if they're approved or not, the amount, the impact on the tax requisition, and I'll pass this over to the chair to discuss it on a line-by-line basis.
Okay, I think we dealt with these the last budget meeting as well, but unless there's a motion to change our minds on this, seeing no hands, we'll move on to the next one. Clean Recreation, and this one was not approved. Director Bush.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a heads up because the SIR board did pass a 4% increase for next year, and because we are RDOS, we're paying even more than that. So just a heads up.
Okay, thank you. Is there no desire to change direction on this one? Okay, moving on. Parks and Rec, divided amongst 8 services.
These are the 8.
Okay. Change there, Director Monteith? Question or?
I guess I'm just looking for some conversation around this. This kind of caught me by surprise, actually. I wasn't expecting this as well as the staff request. So does anybody have any more information on this? I understand a couple conversations I've had with staff, but I still haven't had enough clarity.
Can you answer that?
I can answer at a high level. Along with the staff requests, it would also result in a increased service level of what they would provide, and these are the costs that increased service level result. So what the specifics are, staff's not here right now, but I believe they may be online and be able to answer. Danny, is Justin online?
Who's on? No.
So if I may, then I can just write this down and have the director or the manager of corporate services get back to you. I don't have the specifics, just knowing that it's got a implication. There is some backup that is they require to fill out, and it's part of your budget package. And I can, in the break, I can pull that out for you, and we can talk about it at that time.
So
Okay,
the
we'll
concept
get more-
is when you improve a park or build a new park or trails, then there are costs associated with keeping those new facilities to an acceptable level. So that's what this is for.
Okay. Director Kozakovich had a question, and then Director Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. I am confused on this one as well because we've got program change requests 3, 7, and 8, which are all parks, recreation and maintenance. So for area E, that equals $90,000 increase just there. And then I also have a category of parks contractor at 90,000 with half of it. I know where that goes. I still don't know where the other 45,000 goes. So I'm looking at 135,000 increase. And I need some clarity because I'm not sure how request number 3 is different than request number 8. So what this 27,000 for area E does versus the 46,000 coming up on slide number 8.
Okay, so rather than us stumble through this, let's defer this. Mr. Woods is tied up with emergency operations this morning.
Okay.
He'll be up in Tulameen or Princeton at this point, so we'll bring this back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Flag this one for more clarity, but Director Roberts, you had a question?
Thanks to the chair. Very similar, just in regards to placement people and
Okay.
where, so we might as well bring it up at the same time.
We'll get that clarity then and bring it back. Go on to the next one. Approved Economic Development Area D. No desire to change this one? Seeing no hands? Go ahead, next one. This one was not approved. Falder Water. Any desire to change that?
Well, we've talked about it, and we're going to do a gas tax. We've got a whole plant for Boulder Water that's going to go through
So
gas tax.
not changing this?
Yeah,
way
just leave
this-
it the way it
okay,
is.
No
Thank you.
change there?
Unless-
Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
If I may, we did talk about, you requested that we fund this through the gas tax. However, if you don't make the motion to actually add it back on, it's not part of the 2022 budget.
Okay, so you want to make a motion that?
Well, if I could follow up, I don't know that we need to have the folder. There's a study that's going to come up as well to study the aquifer. I don't think that I want to have that go through the whole budget process. I'd rather it just come to the next board meeting. I was hoping it was going to come yesterday because I don't want it to wait till the end of March to get started on the study. I'd rather do that sooner than later. So
you'd like
can
a
that just be?
separate?
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be part of the budget. It's just gas, it's tax. So can it
Okay.
just come to the board as an item at the next board meeting?
All right, go ahead, Mr. Safino.
No, that's fine. We'll bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay. Next, legislative services, we approved. No changes on this one. Seeing no hands. Next, we deferred this one. This is rec services again.
Mhm.
We'll need more clarity on this one probably as well.
Well, I'm pretty clear on what it is for us. And I think, yeah, we've all talked, I would vote to remove this.
Okay? You're okay? Okay, we'll leave this one, or do you want to move it?
I want to remove it,
Remove it?
remove it, take it
Ah,
off.
I didn't hear you quite right then. So motion's made to remove it, and you're seconding? Any discussion on this one? Seeing none? All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. So go ahead, Mr. Safino.
Just to clarify, because it was deferred, it was not entered into the budget that you've seen now.
Yeah. Well, now it won't be, or if it was, it'll be removed, so. Next one is full-time equivalent 8. This was the other part of that needs clarity then. Okay? Next one. This one was approved, full-time bylaw enforcement.
Oh, so this is the one we talked about yesterday, Mr. Chair. Mr. Atkinson was presenting on it, but we have that resource under our COVID funding. That funding ends for this position in March of 2022. So what this ask is to make that a full-time position.
Yeah. So far, we've approved it. So unless there's a change in direction at this point, we'll leave it. Go ahead, Director Monteith.
Sorry, just a question. Any word if we're going to get COVID funds this year? Because last year, the regional district didn't get word of the COVID funds until after our tax requisition, where the municipalities got word before, so they could change their tax requisition. So we kind of got stuck on that one. So I'm looking for some pre-information.
We have not heard a whisper about more money coming from the province for COVID.
I don't think there'll be a lot of money.
And I don't believe no news is good news in this case, so.
No, I think the money for COVID is gone. Now they're looking at recovery and getting the economic situation under control.
Okay. Moving on to the next.
This is the next one.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. Any desire to change this one? Seeing no hands. Okay.
So the next section is the full-time equivalent request continued. So this is just part of the one you just approved. So this is the next one.
Any desire on a revisit on this? No hands. Okay, moving on. Number 12.
I'm sorry. So Jim, these two slides, the last two slides, that's one position, right? That's not two.
See, 11 and 12?
Just get clarity.
No, one is an increase in FTE and the other one is an increase in the classification. So there's an increase in costs. They could be combined, but.
We don't bring classification changes to the board,
Okay.
right? That's a union
Okay.
agreement.
So we are on 13 then.
Okay, moving to 13. This one was approved. Area D. Go ahead, Director Obrook.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to remove this one, please.
You want to remove it?
Yes.
Okay, making a motion. Is there a seconder for that? Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this? Director Bush?
Which one are you removing?
Number 13, it's about $90,000 cost and we can't afford it.
The legislative assistant for Area D.
Yeah. We'd welcome help from all the other areas if they wanted to help us, but I'm sure you're all in a similar situation.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor of removal? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. So that one's taken off. The next one is up there.
So this is a request from staff subsequent to the November 5th. And this one here is for a update for recreation manager. So again, as the CAO stated, they've asked for a position change and it's something that it's a union issue. So this is more information. It's not in the current budget, but they've asked for it. And that's something that the directors for in the smoke community area would have to discuss before it goes through. But this is more information.
So this is a new position.
It's not a new position. It's just a classification of a previous position.
Okay.
And
the expense that goes with that is?
It would be 13,790. But that's something that can be brought back.
Okay.
I didn't want to blindside everyone.
We'll see that one again then.
Yes.
Okay.
And this one it hurts, but it's mine. It's a request. I'm losing a senior staff member that's been working for the regional district for at least 10 years. She's a 0.5 right now, and that is doing phenomenal work as a 0.5. She's been there so long. I would not ever be able to replace that position for a person at that level at a 0.5. And it would, I think, materially affect the finance department ability to do timely work. So this is something that I'm asking so that we continue doing work and be able to do a number of things which she's doing right now and we continue doing it. So this is a request. Again, I don't want to just blindside you with this at this time, but you can make a decision at the next meeting or discuss it at this meeting.
So this is adding a 0.5 to the existing position, is that?
That's correct.
Okay. Any discussion on this one at the moment? Director Knodel?
Is that not revenue neutral? You lose one, you gain one? Or did I miss something there, Jim?
Go ahead.
We're losing a 0.5 and I'm requesting we replace it with a 1. So it would be the difference for the 0.5 salary that would go with it. One of the things that this position, if I get it, is yesterday you approved the new auditors for, it would be just over $50,000. If I can get this position, $7,500 of that 50 would be reduced, and I would have this position filled with someone that can do $7,500 at the financial statements, so that would be part of it for the funding. So it wouldn't be the full amount. We saved at least $7,500, if not more.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
So it is an increase of 0.5. Any further discussion or a motion on this? Director Monteith?
Sorry, it's only the accounts that are affected are the ones that are listed?
That's where the charges go for this position.
Okay, Director Getz?
Thank you. Are you looking for a motion on this one? Or is it just for
If we want to deal with it
information?
today, we can, or
I'll
you
make a
had
motion
said
to leave it in.
you'd
I'll
move
make
it
it to keep it.
to add it. It is,
Add
okay?
it, yeah.
Seconded, thank you. Any further discussion on this then? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. So it's in and can always be revisited again, always keeping that in mind. Next one.
So first of all, thank you. I'm supposed to be neutral on this, but I might have been biased on this one. So the next section is the draft budget discussion. Operational capital budget, as you've seen, it is two separate areas, two separate budgets now. Staff request policies that capital budget does not have a direct funding. So there, at the time that you see the first reading of the budget, you are going to get a report that asks for some policy changes on the operational budget. The capital budget includes a 5-year summary. And what that does is it allows you as the directors in each area and for each others to see where the FTEs are times going and what the projected costs are. The current year's capital projects include capital funding requests form. So there's a form that, as I stated earlier, is very specific for 2022 projects. And it also includes, if you looked at it, the carry forwards. And that's something that is important. We don't want to miss any projects that were funded in 2021 that are not completed. There, as I stated on November 5th, there's 44 of the projects. I've sent out a reminder to the fire departments for their carry forwards so that that number will increase. So there's assumptions, status quo baseline. This will be the first baseline budget that the regional districts had, only because the operational is now separated from capital, and you'll see a more consistent, I won't call it flat line, because each year there is a CPI increase, and as you've seen in the paper, they were looking at least 4.1 if not higher. And I read in the paper, I haven't updated it, gone into the system and updated it, but they're looking at a possibility of 4.7% for a CPI. So the tax base is on the 2021 revised roll. That will change because between the market change and the non-market change, that will change the percentages that each of the areas will pay based on the different assessment increases, and in some cases decreases. As I mentioned to some of you, I've noticed in the non-market change, for some reason, businesses have actually went down, and I've never seen it like this before. So I'll be challenging that. Okay, so where parcel tax and requisitions are in place, increases are placed onto the requisition. So your operational budget not only shows the increase on the tax requisition for each one, it shows the tax limit, it shows if it's compliant or not, and it also shows if there's a requirement for the parcel tax to change or not. So included in your budget package are as attached here, the budget summary by program. This is a regional district, and it should be you look at the holistic budget, the material budget variances. So that's important because that points out the areas where there's concern, where you should be looking at. And in every case that I had a meeting with the directors, we discussed that. And that if there's any changes, that's where the changes would be. That's been updated now. So there's been some changes where there was a concern, there isn't. And in some cases, it went the other way around. The draft tax requisition, so included in your budget, there's 3 tax requisitions based on what just happened now. There will be a change, especially with the Area D, and that will be brought to you at the next either budget meeting or at first reading. The draft operational budget, that's the 156 pages, and it itemizes, you'll see, I was asked why is there a different color on each of the budgets for operational and capital. That's so that it shows transparently what the administrative overhead is, the approval of the budget changes, and that's something that I will be requesting the board to approve. There's a number of changes. It lists who requested the change, not the specific name, but there's about 2 or 3 of the 36 staff requested it. And of all the rest, it's the director asked for it, and it shows what the original amount was, what the change is, and what the new amount is. And finally, the draft capital budget. Again, that's something that I'm going to call it a work in progress, because one of the things I'm adding on top of this is the reserves for each area, so that you can see if anything in the 5-year capital is affordable or realistic. And one of the things that we'll be adding on also is if the project in future years, 23 onward, is contingent on any grants. One of the things that I would like to see and I would recommend is that we have a budget before the year that the project is being recommended, that we have it so we can have it shovel ready, so that we can be what I call hunters and looking when we have a new reserve or a new grants out there, we can actually go after it immediately. Let's be first on the line and have a booklet ready so that we're doing very well. I'm very impressed. I've worked in a number of areas after I left my previous job, and I've seen how many grants other areas get, and I'm impressed with the level of reserves that we are successful, of grants that we're successful in obtaining. The staff here is what I would call our hunters. So these are approvals of change requests. I apologize, it's small. You do have the copies hopefully in front of you. We can go through like we did for the grants as a group, or go and do it as the supplemental requests and do it slide by slide. In no cases that I can recognize was there any material change in services. As I stated earlier, the manager, when they were available, were in the room and were able to answer your questions. If they weren't, we would pass that on to them. There is, I believe, at least 2 outstanding questions on changes that are not on here because the changes weren't defined by the manager and weren't explained to the director. So I'll bring this back to the chair to see how you want to see this.
Okay, I'll maybe just suggest we go through it with the ones that are on the screen, and then we'll just move on from there. So the three that are up there, is there any questions or concerns with those? Director Olbrich?
I'm having trouble seeing the screen, sorry.
You have it.
I can quickly just go through it if you like.
If you would, please.
So the first one is affecting Area D. It's the fire department for OK Falls, and it's an adjustment in the transfer for the reserves. So there was a 44,520. That's what we discussed in our first meeting to help reduce the tax requisition. The next one is a reduction in the honorariums. There was a large increase in the budget for the honorariums for the fire department, and it was reduced by 15,976. And another transfer to reserve funding, a decrease by $15,000. So it went from $25,000 to $10,000. When we looked at this with the director, there was no consequences to the capital requests of the fire department. They were still able to afford everything that was requested on the capital side.
Okay, thank you for that. Seeing no questions on the rest of those, we'll move on. These are all in your budget package, so you've had a chance to look at them, but if there's a question or concern, please bring it up. Any thoughts on the next group? Seeing no hands, go ahead. Next page. Anything there? Okay. Again, seeing no hands. Go ahead. Still no hands? Go ahead.
I have a hand.
Okay, sorry, Director Gettens?
Thanks. I'm just curious, I think it's just the slide previous. Under general government travel to UBCM convention, and there's an increased request of $6,200, but it's under general government. I thought our UBCM came out of our rural project. So what's that for, please?
Generally it does, but I'll let Mr. Savino answer it.
Thank you. So I did a little research, and what should be happening is that the chair, when they go to UBCM, should be under general government rather than their own specific electoral area.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
That's the only change. It's always been coming out of there in the past, generally.
Okay, thanks.
So any other questions on those listed changes? See,
Which page are we?
hard, I can't read the page numbers.
Which page are you on, Jim?
25 point, it's area change 25.1 on the far left-hand corner.
I don't have those. Is it like page 44 of 430?
I don't have the
45.
page, I don't have your page numbers.
Yeah.
It's 46? Okay, I'm behind. Sorry.
Okay, moving on. Anything here? Seeing none, no hands, go ahead. This looks something different.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Safino.
No, this is, continue, yes, I changed the page, so that's all.
Any questions on this one? Again, seeing no hands. All right.
So I apologize for the number of changes on this one. However, this is a budget that came in for from Suyas Recreation, and it came in after the November 5th budget, so I had to add all of these and amendments. So that's why you see it 25.1 all the way to 25.
This is the Osuyas Arena?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I have no questions on that, so go ahead.
It's still a continuation. Essentially, it's the whole, but their whole budget changed. So very
Okay,
slightly, but it did change.
right, thank you. Seeing no hands, go ahead. Continuation. Seeing no hands here. Okay.
Oh, Robert.
Director Roberts? Missed you.
No worries.
Go ahead. Director Roberts, go ahead.
Thank you to the chair. Jim, I expect again, in regards to the increase in rural projects, and that was some of the stuff we discussed, re the ongoing projects. So I'll see staffing costs from a request from staff, then I'm anticipating it's coming out of the rural projects that I increased by the 10. Is that correct?
All the changes have been added to the specific projects that they said, correct. So it's already included in the budget, except again for the changes that are happening today.
And that's why that change was made, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Any questions, other questions on this? Seeing no hands, go ahead.
I don't like it when it goes up on both sides. I get confused.
Again, no hands. Go ahead. Don't be afraid to put your hand up if there is something that you're questioning. Next one then.
That is the last one. And I
Okay.
would suggest that if the board would like to take a break now.
Might be an idea. What time is it? 10 o'clock? Do we want a 10-minute break for a coffee or whatever and then move on? We're actually going through this reasonably quickly. Let's take 10 minutes. Fill up a coffee or what have you.
We're now here.
Back to our seats, we'll get started.
Oh, here. Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, because that, yeah, you don't.
Okay, look out.
The gang is on its way.
Clear as mud.
Hard to deal with some of those issues that are not real clear, eh?
No, it's challenging for sure. Just making sure we capture everything. Having open conversation. Don't be afraid to speak up. Talk about stuff, because that's been, you know, talking about it. Little groups isn't productive.
I get what they have.
Would you give everybody a yell out in the alleyway? Yeah, or an elbow or whatever. Just get them back in here now.
Really good at it.
The only item on here that I know Jim's flagged it is,
Okay.
South Oakland, the increase for South Okanagan Transit.
Yeah, that would be done.
Oh, it's huge, and no increase in service at all. Suyas is almost 40 grand. You're around 12. We're 20. Rick's 12.
It's a question I've asked, but I haven't heard back the answer yet.
Well, Jim said he wanted to get direction from the board. To not accept it. Yeah, which is fine, but
Nobody wants to work.
I'd like to know more about it.
yeah.
We're starting now.
No. I do, because it's, yeah, I do. understand. And I went-
Okay, we will get started again. Mr. Safino's ready to go up there? Okay. We'll move into the capital projects then. Please go ahead, Jim. Oh, Director Gettens, question?
Yeah, thank you. So just before we move on, we had made a request to defer some of the recreation and parks budgets earlier. And I'm wondering if I could just also ask, when we have time with our recreation managers again, just to get some clarity on where staff are on my recreation and parks budget. I've got a lot of line items for staff, and I don't know what staff does what. And then I also know we have recreation and park staff in our rural budgets as well. So if we can get like just an overview of how we're funding parks and recreation, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, I see Mr. Safino making a note of it. So. Go ahead, Jim.
I made a note of that, so I'll pass that on.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. So with the capital projects here, we'll go through it again by the pages, and if we can follow along on your budget package, we should be able to keep track. So you want to give a brief?
Yeah, so start off on page 53, just give a heads up to the directors. There are 44 different budgets, and included in your package is the detail for 2022, either if it's a new request or it actually lists the carry forwards also. In most cases, the fire department has not been online to do the same system, but they will be. So you don't have the detail, all the detail for all the fire departments, but you do have the specific capital budget separated from the operational. But starting off on page 53 of your agenda, and that is the Anacus Mountain Fire Department. So Chair, if you can let me know if you want me to read the projects, or how do you want to see this? So I will give the page number so you have it in front of you. And in each case, it shows the funding and it shows the specific projects.
Click on there.
Okay, I'll go to the CAO first here.
Yeah, so typically we don't talk really about the local programs. I mean, that's up to a single director really as to whether they tax for that. So we usually start with sort of the regional and then the sub-regional and then the shared and talk about that because it involves more than one person. So what you might want to do, Mr. Chair, is just check and see if the board wants to go through all of the local projects or if they want to skip right to the higher level.
We can do that. Is there a desire from the board to see each individual, or would you rather go to the group? Okay. Looks like a consensus to not worry about those individual electoral area capital ones.
Okay, so I'll just quickly go through, just go to the first one that is very specific to, at the program level. The first number of them are the fire departments.
And just give us the page number of the one you start on so we can.
Yes. Area F.
Where do I find my page? I'm on 300.
Or more.
Is recreation facilities. Yeah, these are all parks. Older, Loose Bay.
Back in the day.
Just majority of these are specific to the electoral areas. So I haven't come across anything that affects program level or more than one area. So the first one would be Karameas areas B and G. I'll just go to the page.
Okay.
Page 81.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Gettens, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just not clear on what we're doing here. We're going through these individual, I do have a question about the Falder water system in particular on the individual one.
Okay.
Okay, so, I don't know.
What page is that one?
You're gonna ask that, hold on. 73.
Okay.
So this is another one that we talked about last week to have come forward to the board outside of the budget process and just as a gas tax request. So can we just make sure that happens for the next board meeting, please?
That's the one you want to go to the board meeting?
Yeah, there's two. So the one that I talked to previously, and then, which is the manual, and then this one about the aquifer study. I just don't want it to get tied up in the budget process for ages.
Understood.
Well, we just have the right guy sitting up there at the table that could tell you whether that's going to make it or not.
Andrew?
Can you respond?
Andrew?
Andrew?
Oh, he's getting his mic.
Okay, great.
Thought he was checking.
So yeah, no, we can make that happen. That's not a problem.
Okay.
Done. Thank you.
No problem. And back to page 83, you said it was?
83? 81.
81, okay. That was the shared service. Is there any issues with that, Director Bauer?
Yeah, I thought we already went through that with Jim with our meeting at the regional district. I thought we
did. This is just bringing it up at the board level, to see if you have any concerns.
Okay, so seeing no issues with that from the three participants, go ahead. Next one.
What about this one? Oh, the next one would be refuse disposal, Penticton and electoral area D.
Page
83? 83.
83.
So sorry, so this is Campbell Mountain Landfill?
Yes.
Any discussion on that? No hands? Move on to the next.
Can I just elaborate on that one then, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, CAO.
Yeah, so everybody knows we have lots of problems at Campbell Mountain Landfill and that we're working a way to resolve them. But we did just hear from the Agricultural Land Commission that we did not get an exemption or a non-farm use on 1313 Grayback Mountain Road for our organics facility. The board's aware that we have an $11 million grant sitting there waiting for us to start construction up there. All we need is the site. So we just heard that last week. We're not sure. I haven't had a chance to sit down with staff and talk about where we're going to go with that. But there might be an opportunity to appeal. But if not, then we have some significant problems because then that affects the egress access into Campbell Mountain. It affects the master planning process that's going on now. It may affect the site. We don't know where our Northern Organics facility will go. On top of that, we're just still trying to finalize the BioCover project. We don't have a certificate on that. We think we're getting close. You awarded a contract yesterday, hopefully getting close to completion on the leachate program because of the contaminated sites register that we're on. There's just a whole bunch of stuff happening at Campbell Mountain. And at the same time, we still do have to be concerned about the level of reserves that we have for Campbell Mountain because we have some obligations to the city of Penticton on the lease with regards to 4 reserves that we're supposed to be maintaining. So just be, I don't really have a comment on the budget, but just be aware there is a whole bunch of stuff going on at Campbell Mountain and not all of it's going our way right now.
That brought up some hands. I'll go to Director Kozakovich and then Director Vasilaki.
Thank you. Maybe this is premature, but are we going to hear from staff on some options, potentially with that piece being that the northern piece of it is not in the ALR? I know it would need more work to make it viable, but is that an option and possibly subdividing and selling off the ALR piece to recoup some funds to put into the northern piece?
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to sit down and talk about that yet. We'll strategize. I know that the potential purchasers that were interested in 1313 are still interested. They've been contacting us, so we have to see if we can use it. But we need to strategize a bit administratively on that. I believe I am meeting with the MLA today to talk about whether it's worth a shot at the minister. We're going to talk about that too.
Okay, Director Vasilaki?
I had the same question, so everything's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other hands, we'll move on to the next one.
Next one's on page 84 of your agenda, and it's 911 emergency call system. There's a $100,000 telecommunication study that's being proposed, recommended. And it's being funded from reserves.
Now, where is this, Jim? Like, are you looking for the board to approve this capital
Yes.
expenditure?
So I'm asking if the board is approving these capital requests because it's a capital expenditure. Not only it may be funded from reserves, the money's there, but there's resources being taken and it's reducing reserves.
Okay, Director Bauer.
Yeah, I just have a question. So this is capital reserve going towards the operating of that 911 emergency call system?
Go ahead, Mr. Safina.
It's for the study of the 911 system. So Mark is not here to answer the specifics, but from what I'm seeing, it's a telecommunication study to help improve and look at going forward what's needed.
So some of the board may be aware that we did a telecommunications study a while ago now. Dave Mitchell and Associates did the study for us, and we found that we were short on redundancy within the 911 telecommunication system. We did like a $2 million improvement to it. We found in the Princeton area, we had our telecommunications infrastructure was anchored to an old barn that had a whiplash aerial on it. So we're in good shape, but at the same time, that was a long time ago now. And with next gen telecommunications capabilities coming on, I know that Central Okanagan is renegotiating that primary ops piece. So it would be a good time for us to do another review. That's not something you want to make a mistake on. So it would be a good time for us to do a review of that telecommunications network.
Okay. So I was just a little confused how that qualifies out of capital when it's for a study, but if you can,
Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
It does qualify in that it's something that it's useful for more than one operational period. So it can qualify. Studies do qualify for the capital reserve.
Okay. Director Vasilaki.
Thank you. We don't have the expertise in-house to do this instead of spending $100,000. It seems to me that that's a huge amount of money to use that perhaps we can do on our own.
CAO?
I would say not. Yeah, we don't have that capability in-house to do that sort of a technical study.
Okay. Seeing no other hands, is there a direction from the board on this? Someone want to make the motion? Director Bauer?
Yeah, I'll make the
You're
motion.
moving it? A seconder? Thank you. Director Knodel seconding. Any discussion? Further discussion? Go ahead, Director Regier.
Just a further question, if I could, Mr. Chair, on, can you describe a bit more the area of study? What are the concerns that are being addressed by this study, and obviously a hopeful improvement in operations?
The area is the regional district. It's a regional program. So it covers all of Similkameen and all of South Okanagan.
Oh, I understand that. You're talking a technical study of how the 911 system works, I believe. And isn't this to try and improve operations of the system? So
Yeah.
What are those improvements that are being sought?
Well, we don't know yet. That's what the study would tell us, is where we need to improve the system. Originally, when Dave Mitchell did the study back, I think it was in 2010, but I can't remember that far back. He pointed out a whole bunch of areas where where we needed towers. We had no redundancy sort of between the Wi-Fi, the telephone lines. They pointed out that there were typically 3 areas that we needed to have connections. We do the connection through Central Okanagan Regional District, and then they contract for the primary ops. And it was just about the physical assets. That's what this study would be about, would be what do we need to improve? Do we need new towers? Do we need new repeaters? What sort of equipment is going to be required with this next generation communications infrastructure? The reason that we don't have a primary ops contract right now is that they're looking at how is the 911 going to pick up cell phones and get a location. So there's all that sort of stuff that's coming on. I know that's sort of a high level answer, but we can certainly get more details, or we can produce the 2010 study. That might give you a better idea.
Okay. Director Holmes?
Yeah, I think for, something of this kind of amount, I would have liked to have seen a staff report come to us with, the scope of the study and the background and just so, because it seems kind of vague right now, and, voting for $100,000 on something that seems a bit vague, it's not really the most comfortable thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if someone prefers, they could always make a motion to defer until we see a study. That would be an option. See a hand there?
No, I want to say something.
Yeah, I see a hand there, Director. Go ahead, Bauer, and then Holmes.
Okay, so if we approve that down the road, this goes out to tender and then comes back to the board anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, we can, that can be accompanied, or before that, the study, and then we can say yes or no anyway, at that point.
You typically want some indication of support before you go out for competition. No sense making those consultants do all the work and then not award.
Yes, I get that, but I mean, this isn't a tax requisition, this is a reserve transfer, so, I think the concern is that it's the amount of money versus the necessity and who's going to do it, right? But you already said we can't do it in-house, so it has to go out. So therefore, it'll come back to the board at one point, at which point we can still make a decision. I mean, that's what it's for.
Yeah, the question would be, do we do it or not whether it's in-house or contracted.
Yeah.
Director Holmes?
I was just going to move to defer until we have that.
Defer until there's a staff report with the scope of the study and stuff?
Yes, please.
Okay, moved, seconded, thank you. Discussion on it? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Carries. Next one then.
Page 85 of your agenda, it's for the emergency planning. It's $30,000 for Firesmart Community Grant, and it's a grant-funded project.
Okay. Any discussion on this one? And do we need approval on this one as well?
Is that it?
Director Gettens?
Thanks, Chair. So what is the emergency planning for? Like, I know it's from a grant, but is it, like, what's the plan for?
Can the CAO answer that?
No. I'm not sure what the grant was for. There's all sorts of Firesmart money out there right now.
Okay, he's not sure of the specifics on that
It would be
one.
unusual for us to turn down a grant.
Okay.
So this is just making an application for the grant. Is that my understanding?
I don't know, do we have this grant already? If we don't get the grant, we wouldn't do it, Mr. Chair. I think it is indicated that it would be a provincial grant, so if we don't get the grant, we wouldn't do the project.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
sorry, just as a follow-up, so are we approving that we're going to apply for the grant, or we got the grant and this is where it's going to go?
In my understanding, staff are always applying for grants. And then it's just a matter that we have to have it in the budget to authorize expenditures from it. So then it comes forward for approval.
Okay. Director Roberts?
Thank you to the chair. I'm not 100% sure, but I know a lot of the discussion going back and forth from a couple of my Firesmart groups in regards to an upcoming grant was, tying into the community cleanup, fire preparer, and use of chipper. So this may be tied to that.
Director Gettens?
So then would it be a grant just for your area then, or are we going to try and spread around 30,000? I'm just curious about what we're applying for, I guess.
I think it's a general Firesmart grant, and then the different groups then prioritize what they want to do in it. And there was your Firesmart, I think it's Kelly, or is it Carrie?
Carrie.
Carrie, there you go, that individual. So I was just following an email train, so I've got it kind of.
Okay. All right.
A little bit of
We'll
agreement.
go on to the next one, unless there was someone who wanted to take it out of the budget. I don't see a reason for removing a grant if we're successful. Go ahead.
Next one's page 86 of your budget. It's corporate facilities. It's a $500,000 expense for the project innovation, design, acquisition, rentals for the building. The majority of this money, if not, I believe all of it, is COVID funded. So it's money that we're carrying over from one year to another. It states under provincial grant, which is what the COVID funding is classified as. And there's $20,000 for the accessible doors for 101 Martin Street, that it would be funded from operational reserves.
Is this needing approval then as well?
Yes.
So any questions or direction on the board or from the board on this? Someone willing to make the motion to approve this one?
I will.
Director Coyne, Senior, moving it, seconded. Thank you. Discussion? Looks like none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one.
Page 87 of your agenda, it's information services. The majority of these costs are infrastructure equipment, photocopier, replacement of, and I do have Danny here for, he could explain what it is, a UPS replacement, server replacement. It's $256,000. It is funded through capital reserves. However, if you go to your operational budget under information services, you'll see a transfer to operational reserves for that amount. So it's indirectly being funded through taxes, but in the capital project section, it shows capital reserve. This is also something that of the 256 from the capital reserve, it is redistributed amongst the administrative overhead. So that's one of the things that does change, and it's not a flat line, is the need to continue the operation for information services, because without information services, we can't function. So that's why you get all of these bumps and curves in the operational overhead account.
Okay, is there any questions or direction on this one? Director Vasilaki?
Thank you. How important is it to replace all this equipment this year? Can we hold off until next year because of the situation we're in with COVID and all the other costs that our taxpayers have to put up with?
I'll defer that to Danny.
Danny, can you answer?
Check. I'll try and answer with a delay. These are not one time versus an extension of from the ransomware attack. We weren't able to complete all the upgrades in 1 year. We're talking multi-thousands of dollars in upgrade. This does continue on. Any less investment in the infrastructure means we will continue to keep some of our exposure out there for a longer time. So the infrastructure upgrades are real to catch up on the lack of investment in infrastructure over the last few years.
Okay, I think that might bring up more questions. Go ahead, Director Gettins.
Thanks. I just have a request. I think it would be helpful to know when we're transferring from reserves, how much is in reserves and if we're healthy in our reserves. I know we asked that at a lot of budget discussions, or, you know, what does our reserve look like? Can we handle taking this out? But, you know, when you look at it and you see 256 from reserves, and then, you know, the one beforehand, there's going to be a provincial grant, but the next year budget is another 400,000 from reserves. There's just, the missing piece is how much is in the reserves and what's the impact of transferring the reserves.
Yeah. Mr. Safino?
So are we healthy in reserves? No. What we're doing in this case here is it's indirectly being funded from the tax requisition. So if you go to the operational budget, you will see a transfer to reserves, and that's how that $256,000 is coming from. It's not money that's sitting there ready to be spent. It's money that's going to be taxed and transferred to the, in this case, the capital reserve. The money is then, that $256,000 is part of the tax requisition through the administrative overhead based on the tier formula and the percentage that it has to be allocated amongst the 156 services. There's a $1.7 million in administrative overhead. Part of that 1.7 is this $256,000.
Okay. So for my own clarification, this is also kind of to prevent future ransomware attacks. Is that part of my understanding on this, Danny?
So during our analysis, there were a bunch of systems identified that were end of life, end of support. This is to replace that infrastructure that is in end of life, end of support. If we continue to have devices and systems out there that are end of life and support, we are more open to forms of attack and forms of breach.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, or a motion needs to be made here? Director Gettins?
Yeah, sorry, my question wasn't specific to this request. I'll move to keep this one in and approve it. But it would just be helpful because, again, you know, just again at the previous page, we had the transfer and the grants, and then the next budget is like we've got like 3 years down the road is a budget of $2 million. So I just think just having this more information about how this actually going, and I don't understand, to be honest with you, what was just said there. So this isn't actually coming from reserves. We're going to tax for this money and then put it into reserves, then take it out of reserves.
Yes, that's.
And is that because we don't have any reserves for things like this? Like,
Not enough, apparently, but I'll go to Mr. Safino.
That's correct. We don't have enough to fund it on an ongoing basis. So as far as information services is concerned, we don't have a specific budget to keep it at the level for operational capital reserve at what it should be. Danny, you can correct me wrong, there's also a catch-up. One of the things that has increased the overhead account is also the licenses. That one alone over $150,000. But the way that I'm proposing that capital and the board ultimately hopefully approves is that there is no direct tax funding from the capital side of the budget, but it needs, if the project has to be done or something has to be purchased, it's taxed, transferred to reserves, and then used in there. Eventually, we are starting in a hole. We're not where we should be. We're going to be taxing so that we can start putting money aside so things like this don't happen. There's a lot of municipalities have a lot of extra money in reserves where they can just draw from it. We can't. So in this case here, it's currently being taxed. I'm hoping that in the future, there will be enough reserves that we can draw at least some from. We have drawn, if you go to the operational budget, there is some that's being drawn, but we can't draw it down to zero. We need something in there for emergencies.
Okay, well, my motion to keep it in still stands.
Okay, moving it, a seconder for that. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yep, I do have one more question.
Go ahead, Director Johansson.
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow up on the discussion started by Director Gettens. So removing this from, or not keeping it in, doesn't reduce our tax requisition by $256,000. Because if I understand what you're saying correctly, is it's really coming out of the admin money that's being collected on a huge number of accounts, all the line items in there, so that it's not a total tax requisition. It's part of the admin.
That's correct. It's redistributed throughout the 156 accounts. Just to clarify, some accounts don't have any admin because they're for debt servicing or strictly transfers to reserves, but the majority do. At least 95% of the services do.
So just to follow up on that, I kind of understood that admin was to cover staff time and wages and stuff like that. So what component of admin is being dedicated to capital, and what component of admin is actually covering operational costs?
Go ahead, Mr. Safino.
So the board authorized staff to take 20% of the administration expense out of operational and redistribute it amongst the capital. And there is no wages included in the overhead. What it is, it's the support costs to have the staff work in the different areas. So in this case, the IT equipment, the IT software, et cetera, is classified as support. So there is no, an example is the wages for the IT department isn't classified in the overhead. That's redistributed as where they work. So that's where we estimate from the previous year where the charges should be. And that's a charge through the wages, salary and wages. You'll see it in your operational budget where it says salary and wages, and that's what that is. The overhead is just the support expenses. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor in this one? Thanks. Opposed? Motion carries. Next one.
Page 88 of your budget, regional trails. And there is a number of capital requests on here. The KVR Similkameen Trailhead, $20,000. The Regional Parks, Trails and Recreation Master Plan, $25,000, $76,000 for the Similkameen Trail construction for Area B and G. That's a carry forward. $137,500 for Skaha Lake Trestle, redeck and rails. $48,000 for the 2 electrical vehicles. $50,000 for purchase of a pickup, and $92,000 for a 3-ton single axle dump truck. And as the budget states, $190,739 is from operating reserves and $263,500 is from gas tax.
Okay, I'll go to Director Kazakovich.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the purchase of the vehicles and a dump truck. So that's $190,000. The dump truck's $92,000. So Do we have an existing dump truck? Is this replacing it or is this brand new? And I guess my concern is we often contract out for upgrades to trails. So are we trying to do more of that ourselves by purchasing a dump truck? I know we don't have a public works yard. I'm sure we'll find a spot for the dump truck. But is this new for us or replacing existing?
Mr. Savino?
Danny, can you tell me if Justin is on? So, Justin, can you answer this question?
Yeah, I sure can. Can you hear me?
We can. Or we did.
Yeah, so this would be a new dump truck. For us, this would be an asset that we haven't had access to before. Currently, we rely on contractors, or quite often we're using a small utility trailer that we're hauling smaller amounts of material around. So when we're traveling longer distances or in remote locations, it can be challenging. The other opportunity to take advantage of here is the Firesmart program, and hopefully some chipping events that we can actually use this equipment to facilitate those events.
Does that answer your question? Director Knodel and then Director Gettins.
This would be for Justin. It's kind of leaping ahead, but the capital expenditure, Okanagan River Channel Trail resurfacing and argument to the Calpine for 2023, 8.5. Does that mean we will be getting tenure on that stretch? Is that anticipated?
That's certainly the hope. We continue to work on that file.
I could go ahead, Director Knodel. You have further?
Oh, it was just a thank you to Justin for his work on that one.
Okay. Director Gettins?
The Community Works gas tax for 263, whose gas tax is that? Like what areas?
Mr. Safino?
I'd have to go back and look at it, but I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay. So direction from the board on this?
I have
Director
just one more
Gettins?
question. Are there any other vehicles? I think 2 years ago, we had like a whole list of vehicles that we were going to replace. Because I'm curious too, what Director Kazakovich was asking as well. So there's 2 electric vehicles and a truck and a dump truck. Are there any other vehicle requests from staff this year?
I believe that there are, but it comes out of different reserves, so it would be in each of the reserves that we're allowed to draw it from. The way that the vehicles are financed and recharged out dictates where they come out of the budget, and mainly it's either in regional trails or general government. Under general government.
Okay. Direction from the board on this one? A little bit of indecision.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Director Bauer is moving it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seconder, Director Knodel. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of this? Thank you. Opposed? Seeing no hands, motion carries.
Next
Next
one is
one.
page 89 of your agenda. It's a carry forward for $200,000 for the solid waste management plan. And as you see that there is no administrative charge on this because it's a carry forward, and staff's here to answer questions.
Okay. Questions on this one? Seeing none. We don't have to approve this.
No,
It's already happening.
Yes, this is just for information. Next one.
Next one.
The next one's page 90 of your agenda. And this is also a carry forward, more for information than anything else. This is the software that the board approved for the building inspection department. It's $75,000 is still left before we complete the project. I just want to let staff, one of the requirements for staff is to let the board know any of the projects that are carry forward, and this is one of them.
Okay. So that one's for information. Next one.
I think it's a double, just click it over. So the next one is okay, it's electoral area, so that's rural. So as far as projects go that affect the overall area, that's it. The rest of them are specific to the electoral areas. You've had meetings with staff, with the managers, myself, and you're aware of what the capital projects are. They are affordable, and other than the information services where it is an impact on the taxes, the rest of them isn't a major impact. It's we either have the reserves or we have the grants already in place, and there's COVID funds that are being carried over that will be carried over from 2021 to 2022. One of the requirements of staff is that we have to have that as part of the audited statements. So you will be seeing a detailed listing of how the money was allocated and how it was spent and what's left. So the next section is discussing on the overhead. Page the overhead on. So on page 98, it talks about the 2021-22 overhead charge and comparison. I wanted to be transparent and actually state why there's a major variance, and it's essentially not only just CPI across the board, which you've seen in the papers at over 4%, but the need to continue and have continuity in the Information Services Department. So I wanted to show that there's an increase across the board. The percentages are for the tiers are tier 1, 5.57, tier 2, 4.46, tier 3, 3.34, and tier 4, which is the newest one, which is the one that we created, staff recommended 2.51. There is a new number 5 tier, which I found when we did some research, that it's a negotiated amount. It's of no more than $1,000 we're allowed to charge. So that's something that's new that I need to tell the board. That was outside my control. The contract was signed, and that's now part of the 2022 budget process. As far as the overhead charges, there is going to be a recommended staff policy, which the board can review and determine if they want to continue it, that every 4 years, the administration overhead will be reviewed so that every new board can understand and look at the direction or give staff direction. Things may change in 4 years. They won't change materially, but at least if nothing else, it'll be a status quo to whatever tweaking happens between now and then. As far as the reports go that you're getting, I'm hoping that you'll be receiving more. By the time you get the reading, you will get a report which states the average cost per household, not just average, but at $100,000 increments. So there has been other budgets that we've been supplying to other areas like the Parks and Rec for Oliver Area C, where they received the report which shows average costs for 100, 2, 3, 4, right up to $1 million, so that anyone can extrapolate there. If they're in between, you can't do it 100% of the properties, but you can extrapolate, look at costs per capita, because that's one of the things that's important. When you look at the costs based on assessment, you're going, wow, this one's a lot higher than the other. Is it fair, et cetera? But I think you have to look at holistically and look at what the cost per capita would be. Each man, woman, child gets a benefit from the regional district services. They are all regional district residents. And I think it's more appropriate to have that kind of information available. And I'm also including what would be the revised non-market growth, which is pivotal. I think in looking at the tax increase, ultimately, in previous years, not all regional districts use the non-market growth. So where in one area might have said that you got a 5% increase, if they had a 3% non-market growth, their tax increase was 2%. Yet we're telling everyone it was 5%. So that's something that I'm adding, and I now have the availability to get the non-market growth for municipalities. So I'll include that also. But as far as the numbers that I have as of now, they're preliminary. There's a few challenges, as I discussed with some of you, that I need to talk to British Columbia Assessment Authority on behalf of the electoral areas. But as far as the municipalities goes, I will keep the CFO, your CFOs, involved in the process of what I'm doing, just in case it does affect you also, because non-market growth affects your ability for service level, tax increases, or reserves. So with that, I open it up to, through the chair, any questions that you may have through the chair to me.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any questions for Mr. Savino?
Can I just, so when you say after each election, Jim, you mean, so we'll be doing a review of overhead charges in, at the end of 2022, going into 23?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Seeing no hands. Go ahead, Director Regier.
Thank you to the chair. Just confirming, like for this year, are you suggesting, for example, on the overhead allocation by formula, that they're now locked in if some further discrepancies perhaps are discovered?
Go ahead.
If you mean locked in, and the percentage for the overhead as it stands will change as the budget changes, because it's based on a formula. But if you're looking at will the overall formula change, that's based on the board. I will be bringing a report recommendation to the board of how they want to see the formula evolve. And then it'll be up to the board to see if they, with the recommendations of how we see it, where it's fair and where there can be changes. If you go back and look at the regional districts throughout the British Columbia, very few have the very exact same formula. It's there to meet the needs of the organization. It goes anywhere from a flat rate to a percentage like ours to somewhere in between. This board took a huge step when they took the recommendation to move 20% of the operational costs to the capital. That helped to try to make it fair. So it'll be up to the board to determine where they want to look at with the operation, the overhead budget and the formula. So it's not up to me, it's up to you as the board.
Anything further?
Just
Director Regier?
as a comment, if I might, I know in November of 20, when the overhead, when in effect you brought forward the current overhead calculations for the formula. The amount in what turned out to be what's referred to as special contracts for sterile insect and for library, et cetera, that came forward with an overhead rate that was about 1.4%. And that this year, and I'm not sure how much the board has reviewed it, but it's up about 80%, so that it's now a really significant charge for the library or sterile insect, et cetera. And I'm not sure how well that's observed by directors in that the other formulas are up a fairly small proportion, and this one's up quite large. And I'm not sure whether that was discussed. I did listen to last two-week ago meeting, and I didn't hear a discussion around that significant shift in what many directors had talked about in previous times of being an overcharge in effect of those expenditures that require only really the preparation of a check to be written. Thank you.
Mr. Safino?
So the formula is the formula. I don't go through each of the accounts and manually add in what I think it should be. What is included, first of all, you're correct, there is a huge increase in administrative overhead across the board. And that is direct, one of the direct costs are the new capital requirements for IT, and at least $150,000+ for the licenses, which we're now doing a catch up. Every time we buy new software, there's an increase. So that 150,000+, that's ongoing now, where that wasn't there in prior years. So we calculate what the dollars are, which are then redistributed based on the formula that the board has authorized us to use. Until that formula changes, that percentage stays across whatever the budget is. It takes into account, okay, this is what we need. I stated 1.7 million. Of that, 1.35 million is charged against operational. All the rest is capital. And as far as the example that you stated, in 2020, the administrative overhead for SIR was $74,000. The formula which the board accepted and we're continuing to use it, dropped it. Did it go up? Yes, they all went up. And as far as the formula goes, it's not something that I said I can choose. I put in the amount. The way that the program uses it automatically says, okay, this is what you need for each one. Did it go up? Yes. And in some cases, the budget is so low, the percentage change is not very material. So we've got budgets that go from $500 to millions. The one that's millions is going to be hit harder. The higher the cost based on the formula, the higher the percentage increase. So in some cases, yes, the percentage is going to increase. And until the board changes the formula, it stays that number. And I am recommending that it be reviewed. Things change, but I think once every 4 years, if at the board's discretion, I think that the board can leave it up to them. We can discuss what the formula is, and then they can say, yes, we want to look at it, or no, you don't. There's other areas. There's going to be other recommendations also to try to streamline the project. Ultimately, I believe it's always been the staff and the board's policy to be fair. There are many ways to charge administrative overhead, and is there a right way? I believe that there is. We can get it as close as possible. Where we're doing right now is the fairest way. So that's all I really can say. It's not, I don't go in there and type in, oh, I don't like this department, and give them a high administrative overhead. It's based on a consistent formula.
Mr. Director Regier, just one more and then I'll quit. Thank you. Are you suggesting when the board approved the formula for a year ago that it was understood that the special contracts such as library and sterile insect, that it was understood that they would be disproportionately charged, the overhead charges, so that's up about 70% this year compared to what's called major operation, partial services, and minimal services? Minimal, some would think, is at the bottom, but special contracts are well below that. That special contracts would be the one that would be hit with the 70% increase to get to 2.53% this year. And the other ones are up maybe 20%. You do think that was what the board understood?
No, I don't. But what I'm stating is that there's a tier process. The tier was established in the last meeting. I specifically gave a list of all the tiers. The only one that changed, and I did bring it up to the board, is that special contract that we had with the Osoyoos Area C, where staff and the board had no change, no option. That was set at $1,000. What happened is the percentage is based on the tier, and whatever that tier is, that's what the percentage charge is. Is it something I did intentionally or assume that the board accepted? No, it's based on that formula. And when and if the board asks for a review, that's the kind of stuff I'll bring up. There's consequences to different decisions. And as far as what happened with the change this last year and it's carried forward, is it fair more than the 2020? Yes. The 2020 drastically changed the way that the administration charges were, overhead was charged. And if you go back to 2020 and look at the municipal budgets for overhead versus the electoral areas were charged more because it's fair. As far as things like the SIR, OBWB, et cetera, it's fair than the 2020. We're moving in the right direction. And I believe right now, as far with what the formula is at, the charges are being distributed as fairly as it can be. So unless the board directs me to change the formula, it's just going to spend more hours of time just doing a what if, and that kind of what if is time consuming. But it's up to the board if they want to see me spend that time to do that.
Okay. Any further questions, Director Gettens?
Thank you, Chair. I hear what Director Rager is saying for sure, and I get that there's a formula, and I get that the board passed the formula. I didn't know that it would fluctuate, like the different tiers and everything, but I get that we're trying to get there. I do have to say that when we are charging overhead, and no staff time, just overhead of like $22,000 for CIR, $22,000 for library, $8,700 for the fire department, and that's also on top of the admin fee that we get charged by the city. It's a lot, and I do think these are services that are now supplementing other overhead that we're needing. And I just think it's important to be realistic with the overhead that's required for the work. And if that is supplementing overhead that we need in other departments, I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have during the review process to make sure we really understand how much overhead is required for staff time. It seems like an awful lot of overhead for the Penticton Fire agreement with the city, recognizing that there is staff time involved, but I don't know how much staff time requires $8,000 worth of overhead, if you get what I'm saying.
Mr. Safino?
So as I stated earlier, we have $1.7 million to redistribute. How you redistribute it is based on how the board thinks it's fair. Staff has made a recommendation. There's a number of ways of doing it, but those 156 services have to pay a fair share. What is a fair share? Well, we came up with something that I think that is fair. And just to be honest, if you go to the North Okanagan for RDCO, you'll see a recommendation from me about what I did here. They didn't accept it because they had their own reasons, but I thought that was fair and this board accepted it. So again, how do you distribute the 1.7 million? And as far as the fluctuation in the administrative overhead, that's because there's a fluctuation in what's required to have continuity in the organization. And in this case, the biggest single increase is information services. So we don't have enough reserves to do a flat line. So you're going to get a fluctuation. So this year it went up. Next year it may stay the same. It may go down. I've got to do an evaluation of that. But I wanted to be clear, and you saw it in the two slides, last November 5th and today. I wanted to be transparent and show where the funds are, why there's an increase. Did I see that there's an increase in administrative overhead? Yes, I did. But without cutting some services, like if I go to the CAO and said, well, we can't afford these IT, let's keep the administrative down. That's going to affect your services, which affects your taxpayers, which affects the phone calls that you get, and it affects staff. So that's the dilemma, is what is fair. And I could say I can give you a lot of different formulas, but this is the one that works. I did a detailed report for the city of Penticton that I really went in depth. It took a while, but it was worth it. I saw what happened in the past, and there's a continuity now. In the last number of years, there wasn't. So 2 years in a row, it's the same formula. Is it the same dollars? No, because there's a change in the requirement. But it's the same formula 2 years in a row now, which this board hasn't had that for at least a couple of years. And going back and looking at the past formulas, there may have been a reason. I'm not saying it was wrong. Things change. and you have different ways of doing things. And I have my own recommendations that I would recommend to the CAO, and the people before me would have it. So I'm not saying they're wrong. For that time, it might have been right. I don't know.
Just quickly.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you,
Please.
Chair. I just wanted to make it really clear that I'm not questioning transparency at all. I think you've done a really great job of bringing everything forward. It's just when you're dealing with this many budgets, so many different players within a budget, different partnerships, it's just information that you don't always grasp what you're understanding at the time until you see it play out for a little while. And I think what I'm seeing here is just questioning the overhead that's required for the staff person to do this portion of the contract on behalf of Area F. I think if we're going to agree to this as a board, we just have to recognize that that tier is supplementing overhead for other services, in my opinion. I just think it's an awful lot of overhead between these special contracts that are going towards something that's not just reserved to take care of the special contracts. It's not, I'm not questioning your transparency at all. I think you've done amazing on the transparency. It's just sometimes it takes a while to understand what your decision as a board looks like after a couple of years. So I just want to make that clear.
Mr. Safino.
And I recognize where you're going with this, and I've actually had questions from staff wanting to know what are we getting out of this administration cost? And what I tell them is there's a lot of work in the background. You've got an ongoing bylaw that needs to be reviewed. There are always reviews for one reason or another. Communicate with the city of Penticton, for instance, on your contract. We review, so there is work. It's how do you redistribute fairly the 1.7 million? That's all I really can say about that.
So, but just for clarity though, the staff time, this is not covered in that amendment, like this tier, the staff time is under, right. So that's the overhead in my mind, unless I'm misunderstanding overhead, is computers, your lights, your heating, not the people. So the conversations and everything that's covered under another budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Follow up, go ahead.
And that's correct, but in the background, you've got someone looking at bylaw. So that person who's reviewing the bylaw uses computers. They get paid, they get HR support. So is it direct wages? No, but so what we're saying is based on the policy, it's the support costs that go with that staff. So there's always something that somebody's doing for all the 156 services. You've got the legislative services that are always on each of the bylaws and making sure that they're being held up correctly. It's compliant to the bylaw. I review that with Christy on an ongoing basis. She's going to be receiving a report from me on every one of the budgets. So if they're compliant or not, what should be done so that we conform to the bylaws and the province is happy with us. So there is costs always going on in the background, not directly, but indirectly.
As one of the longer-serving board members here, this has been an ongoing, wouldn't say an issue, but it's been an ongoing experiment in a lot of cases of trying to juggle these formulas to make it work. And we're getting closer. So I'm comfortable as where we're at for now. Director Regier, you had a question?
One more last question, if I might. Mr. Zaffino has recognized or confirmed that when you charge overhead on a contract that's been arrived at and doing all of the labor to analyze the appropriateness perhaps and the legislative issues around approving a contract, that labor is not what's in the overhead. The overhead is just simply the Human Resources Department and the legislative services and finance, et cetera. So I'd ask the question, do you have an idea that if you're charging an overhead charge, what amount of labor is used to justify, for instance, $1,000 worth of charge? Would that be, and if I knew your total labor bill, I'd probably just do a formula. I mean, it's $1.7 million of overhead that's being charged out by this formula. And if I think the RDOS has about $20 million, so it's less than 10% of the labor that's going out, if that is a correct labor charge, and it may well not be, but you'd have to have like $25,000 worth of labor to arrive at the West Bench overhead charge to rationalize that charge there. I think that's how you're arguing that this services out of finance and corporate facilities and information services that comes out as a function of the staff that are doing the service, that's how the formula is intended to work. And is that, do you know what the ratio is of these overhead charges to staffing, and therefore you could work out what level of service you think it's arriving at? Thank you.
Mr. Safino?
I believe when I did the analysis for Penticton, I was saying it was 13% for administration overhead. However, what I want to clarify is that don't look at what the wages should be charged to each service. We look at the wages as we have to estimate a year in advance where we do our charges. So we keep track. If I'm working on a specific project for one of you and it's for something that doesn't affect anyone else overall, then I'll charge it to your area. If it's something that's going to use or affect just electoral areas, I'll charge it to electoral area administration, which is a city hall of 9 different areas. But if it's general government, it's another city hall for all of you. And as far as the wages are concerned, if you go back and look at your own budgets, the municipal budgets will talk about, you don't charge administration directly to your water, sewer, electric. You charge a percentage based on an overall cost on the general government side. That's what usually does, and that's how it was when I was with Penticton, and it could have changed, and that's how it was in my last place. What you do is you do your best guess estimate. But municipalities have 4 to 5 different services. We can't charge 10, 15, 20 minutes to the electoral areas of the 156 projects that we have, services that we have. So we have to make our best guess of where we're going to charge it, but there is a cost associated with that support costs. Don't link it to the wages. That $1.7 million is just a unique way most regional districts will redistribute the costs. As far as the percentage goes, we're talking about contract services. That's why the tier basis was created. So any projects or any services that are contracts, that's why there's a tier 3. That's why there's a tier 4. To recognize that the workload is not as much as it would be if it was a tier 1. Some of the costs, for instance, for Campbell Mountain, which is a tier 1, there's a lot of background work. There's a lot of work that is involved everywhere from the keeping track of the bills that go out to the payment, to pay the staff, the bylaws that go with it, reviewing the reserves, mandatory reserves that have to be updated for the year-end audited statements, things like that. But if you start linking the 1.7 million to the wages, that won't work. You can create a formula and say, this is what it is, yes. But is that the right thing to do? No, not for regional districts. I have to keep stating, comparing the municipality to regional districts they're not comparable. It's when you ask your own finance staff, how would they behave? What would they do if they had 156 services? They would have to change your budget dramatically. I have a budget for municipalities that I would love to use for regional districts, but I can't. It's my own budget. It's being used right now in another municipality. It is seamless. Looks at the administration, automatically recommends it to the council of the day, but I can't do that here. I created a unique budget here to help meet the requirements that was placed on me by the board. So we have a very good budget program called Questica. It can't do what the budget program that I wrote. I'm using them both. But it's because it's so unique. I had to just make it work. And again, all I can say is it's up to the board to create the tiers. The one thing that I did bring to the board is what the tiers are. And I don't know if that's been brought before and why they're that tiers. It's not arbitrary. And I actually brought it last year. I brought the tiers back to the managers to tell me, okay, give me your input. They gave me the input, and that's what I brought to the board. So unless something changes, and again, it's clearly up to the board to determine what the formula is based on some what ifs.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no more hands. Oh, on the screen, is there one? I'm not seeing Director Knodel or Director Monteith, I see, but go ahead, let's start with Director Monteith.
To the chair, I understood now that capital funding was not to be done through tax requisition. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So looking at the information services, that's coming in under capital funding.
Yes.
So that's tax requisition.
So it's not funded direct. Oh,
go ahead, Mr. Safino.
So it's not funded directly from taxes, it's indirectly. So what happens is the funds that are used to fund the capital projects are in the operational side as transfers to reserves. And then we draw from those reserves to fund the capital. That's what I'm coming to the board to recommend, so that at no given time, whenever you see an operational or capital budget, you don't have to worry what's the tax impact. It's already shown in the operational side. So if you go to the operational budget, you'll see a large transfer to reserves that pops up on the capital side. So indirectly, it can be funded, but not directly. And if you go to municipalities, that's the majority, that's how it's done.
Okay. Follow up, go ahead.
I do, sorry. Do we need all of the infrastructure upgrades that are being recommended? I mean, I see 172,000 on equipment. And there's not a lot of, like in the breakout, there's not a lot of detail exactly what we're getting for that 172,000.
I'll defer that to Danny.
Go ahead, Danny.
I'll try again with this mic. So the 175,000 is for a lot of the equipment and infrastructure costs. When we're talking about pieces of equipment, one little switch costs us $15,000. We have 20 of them that are out of support and compliance just over the years. They were bought once every 10, 15 years. We're having to hit that time period. I'll switch mics.
Sorry, there's an echo.
Maybe grab one of these.
That echo is a little hard to follow.
So when it comes to the infrastructure, a lot of things that have happened with the IT infrastructures that was purchased many years ago, we have switches that are out of compliance. These switches are in the order of magnitude, as I said, $10,000 a piece. Every time we expand more staff, more locations, we need a port to add them onto the network. Realize that there's only 48 ports in a switch. We add the 49th person. That's an immediate jump of $15,000 because of how the network needs to expand and scale. What's also happening is that as the licensing is now becoming a ongoing yearly charge, because you can no longer really buy software, you end up buying a use of software really in perpetuity. So you'll see in our licensing that we're having to pay for the use of software every year. Webcasting software, eScribe software. You may have bought that for $20,000 previous year, but you have to pay $16,000 a year just to use it now. That's happening with hardware as well in the sense of licensing and maintenance costs. So as we purchase more equipment in the hardware side, we're now moving it into basically a yearly operational cost. The way that used to happen where we had these capital chargers, you'd buy them every 15 years or so, and then you'd have this big blip. We're being forced into normalizing those blips into basically a yearly charge and a new baseline moving forward. And that's both happening on the software and the hardware side, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Director Monteith.
Sorry, so does that mean that we're looking at that sort of increase every year?
Once we get out of our kind of negative point, yeah, there'll be a new baseline. So for software moving forward, and it's the kind of thing where we don't have much control. Most of the industry is moving to a utility model, like the water, power systems. You pay every year, every month, and that's what the industry is moving to. We're basically losing the ability to buy software and just keep it and buy it and upgrade it whenever we want. We have more and more software and platforms that are moving to a process which basically we pay a monthly charge like the electricity bill. There's no difference in how they are funding this industry now. And same with the services on the hardware side. We want to get an appliance that deals with our ransomware monitoring system. It's a piece of hardware that comes in, but then there's a yearly charge to make that hardware phone home, talk to services, keep itself updated. That is where the industry is going. So you will be seeing, as we're trying to play catch up from our previous attack and kind of modernize the system and infrastructure to be able to actually connect to most sites, to be able to monitor the sites, to check the safety of the sites. As we are going through this catch up period, there's these bumps and we will find a new plateau and then that will level off. So there still could be a couple more years of minor increases until we get to that new plateau.
Okay, Director Knodel. Your mic isn't working.
That was a mistake. I wasn't, I believe I got a hand up on the participants channel. I wasn't, that was accidental, sorry.
Okay. Director Holmes?
Yeah, just further to Director Monteith. I remember probably about a year ago, we had that report and presentation on the vulnerabilities of our IT system. And I think we have to recognize that that ransomware attack was a big wake-up call, and we don't really have much choice in spending this money the way I see it. We're really taking a big risk if we don't. And I guess further to what Danny was saying, if you think of our own personal spending on technology and how that's changed, so if I think of myself, not only do I have an internet account and a cell phone account, but I'm also paying for Netflix. I'm also paying for Spotify. I'm paying for all these streaming, all these different services on a monthly basis, which before you would never pay. I'd never paid before. So I think that's just the way the market is changing, for better or worse.
Yeah, it's going to be noticeable until we catch up. So, did I see a hand from Director Gettens? No? Okay. Seeing no more hands, are we concluded on this version or portion of the budget, Mr. Zaffino?
Just one thing that I forgot to say, everyone from the CAO to the senior staff to my finance staff, I want to say thank you for their support and all their hard work. You're seeing me doing all the talking, but essentially it's a team effort, and I just want to make sure that they're recognized.
They are, and much appreciated, all the effort that does go into this. It's a big job, so thanks. Director Kozakovich.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, can I just, Jim, back up to something I noticed on page 57? So it's capital expenses for Naramata Fire. We have a $500 capital expense listed next year for the satellite fire hall. However, as you know, our donation category has $350,000. So I think by listing 500,000, it gives the public the expectation that we have $500,000 when I don't believe we do. I know next year we're getting an additional donation of 75,000. So I'm thinking we either need to reduce that figure to 425,000, or if I can get from you later how much is in the account right now, and then knowing that 75,000 will be added to it, if we could just adjust those numbers, please.
Mr. Zaffino?
Because of our last meeting, I noted that, and it was too late to make it in this change. It will be on the next one. You asked me to take a look at what the actual donations were, and then add 75,000 for 2022, and that's what's happening.
Okay. I would just encourage everybody, if you've got spare time, to look at those capitals and make sure, or capital expenses, and make sure they are what you want for your individual areas. And then if there's an issue, go see Mr. Safino or bring it forward at future budget. I don't expect to see these at another meeting unless there's an issue with one of them. Seeing no more questions, I believe that's the end of the agenda, unless I'm mistaken.
Correct.
We're done much earlier than planned on. Looking
Hold
for a
on, Chair.
motion to adjourn.
Hold
Move.
on, Chair.
Chair. Oh, I'm seeing
Chair.
someone.
Chair, you're
Oh,
blind.
over there. That's my blind spot. Sorry, go ahead, Director
No,
Johansson.
I did have one question, and I didn't see this item get covered. So I just want to make sure that we talk about it a bit, and it's the extremely increased costs, 116% for transit South Okanagan. And I'm just wondering, I know I had mentioned that to Jim before, with no increase in service, but a huge increase in cost. Just wondering what we can do about that, if anything.
Mr. Safino, go ahead, please.
So you're correct. Transit is a huge increase. There's, if you look at the budget, you'll see a material increase in operational costs and a decrease in revenue. And that's something that a budget is given to us from the BC Transit. It's something that unless you reduce the service level through the memorandum of agreement, that the cost is the cost. I've actually asked the manager in charge of that department to bring back a report requesting that the board direct staff to look at, to challenge BC Transit for one of two things, is to justify the cost or at least give us some more COVID funds because that's one of the issues is the COVID funds on the revenue side. If they can give us additional COVID funds to reduce the tax requisition as they did in 2021. In 2021, they recognized the costs, and 2022, they didn't. So that's something that will be coming to the board in the very near future.
Thank you, Jim.
Director Holmes.
I'd also like to ask about the increase in the operational funds for environmental conservation. It's up 40,000. I'm just wondering what accounts for that.
Mr. Safino, can that?
The department, just hold on, we'll just check to see which page is that on?
That would be, well, 226 on the slides. It would be page 89 in the.
Oh, that's the one that went from 380 to 450?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so that's, on that one there, back in 2020, that tax requisition was reduced from 450 to 280,000, and then in 2021 it was increased to 380. It's a catch-up. That is something that I've been asked to bring back to the board. It's a board decision. I talked to the chair about, and the chair brought it up to me that it's something that it is increased by $70,000, and that's something that the board would have to decide because the tax requisition would depend on the ability of the board to fund specific projects. So that's something that I would bring back to you. And if you want to bring that down to a lower amount, the tax requisition allowable is just over 600,000. But there's something I believe that I was told that the board at one time limited the actual transfer to no tax requisition to no more than 450. And that's something that the board may want to determine and direct staff how you want to see that.
Okay. Ms. Malden, do you have any clarification on that?
I think the only clarification I could add to that is I understand back in 2019, this conservation fund had a decent reserve to allow for land acquisitions throughout the year, because land acquisitions can happen at any time as opposed to the intake for projects. And that reserve was depleted. It was a transfer from reserve back into the service, which dropped the requisition amount. So at this point, we realized this year that the funds that we thought were in the reserve weren't in the reserve. They in fact had decreased the requisition amount. So in an effort to sort of build the reserve back up a little bit, this is proposed to start to do that.
Okay. So there is the option to bring it down to that 450 tax requisition, I think, rather than the 480, if that is something that was desirable, but if not, we can leave it where it's at too. So, not seeing any more hands or questions. There's always a chance to do some of these changes later. Remember about budget. It's never over till it's adopted. So, and even then we do make changes afterwards. So, looking for a motion to adjourn then. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Done. Well, it's close, 10 to 12.
Can you just give us a little update on what we're doing next week, Wednesday and Thursday? Would that be a good reminder while we're all here?
CAO, could you give us a next week's update?
Yeah, so the evening of, so Wednesday evening and then Thursday during the day, Gordon McIntosh is coming in, and he has a formula for going through a strategic planning process in a fairly expeditious way. So he'll lead us through that. So again, we're back here on the Wednesday evening. Thursday, I think up until about 3, and he's got a package that he's going to take us through in order to get us to higher level priorities for the last year of the term.
Is it start time? I believe is Christy.
4 o'clock in everybody's calendars. We're waiting for final confirmation from Gord McIntosh as to what that night is going to look like. But for the short term, keep it in there at 4. As soon as we get any update from him, which I hope is in the next couple days, we'll adjust the calendars accordingly.
And it's here?
It is here.
Yes, it's here. Okay, I believe there's lunch. It's 1:45 or so.
We'll see. We'll go out and see.
Yeah, take a look.
It'll be a surprise.
I better shut this thing down.